Iran today showed it's still ready for a fight, parading weapons through Tehran for annual Army Day celebrations. But the talk in Iran is all about diplomacy, a possible deal, maybe soon, with President Trump that Iranians hope will end sanctions and avoid a war. The negotiations focus on Iran's nuclear program. Iran says it's strictly peaceful, but it enriches uranium beyond a level needed for civilian use. President Trump today said his red line is clear.
I'm for stopping Iran, very simply, from having a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon. I want Iran to be great and prosperous and terrific.
We were given rare access to Friday prayers at the main mosque at Tehran University.
The mood in Iran is clearly in favor of diplomacy. And what's happening in this mosque is actually quite extraordinary. Many of the people here are soldiers, people who'd be generally considered hardline. But the preacher, at this very moment, is speaking positively about a potential deal with the United States.
The preacher said Iranians shouldn't trust the United States, nor consider it a friend, but added that negotiations are vital and appropriate. For Iran, that's something of an olive branch. Outside the mosque, we met Atifa Asefi, an architect.
Do you think these talks are going to work?
I feel it's good. I'm optimistic, she said.
No one we spoke to here seems remotely interested in a war with the U.S. Their eyes are on a deal. Negotiations resume in Rome tomorrow. Lester?
All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today is Monday, April 21st, 2025, Missile Monday. And I have this article from NBC News, and it reads, Iran parades missiles through the streets in a show of force as nuclear talks ramp up. So I'm just going to go into this article, bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And as it stands, Slakia, as it stands, there are currently 9 nuclear armed nations, but apparently, Iran is going to be the 10th, So it says, Tehran, Iran. On Army Day in Iran, the Islamic Republic displayed its military might, parading thousands of troops through the streets of the capital, Tehran, along with its S-300 missile defense system, drones, and other military hardware, watched and praised as President Masoud Pezeshkian. It was a very public show of force, says, but behind the scenes, Iran is pushing for diplomacy with Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas Araghchi, or however you pronounce his last name, traveling to Moscow, where he met with President Vladimir Putin before sitting down for talks with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, on Friday. Our Russian friends gave us the necessary information. Araghchi was quoted as saying by Russia's state-run TASS news agency after his meeting with Putin on Thursday. He is scheduled to travel to Rome for talks with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff on Saturday, where they are expected to resume discussions about Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. The pair met in Oman last Saturday and held the first round of talks between the two countries since President Donald Trump returned to the White House. But while both sides described those talks as positive and constructive, Iran has said since that it had been confused over the mixed messaging by the Trump administration on whether it wants Iran to completely dismantle its entire nuclear program, which that won't happen. You know, they've already made even missiles. It's too late. Says the reality is we are receiving contradictory and inconsistent messages from the United States. Aragachi was quoted as saying in Moscow by Iran's Mir news agency, "From our perspective, what matters is what is said at the indirect and immediate negotiation table." Witkoff had earlier suggested that Iran could enrich uranium to a cap of 3.6%, but then later walked it back, saying the complete abandonment of the program was the goal. Were it to be kept at that level, it would have been in line with the 2015 deal Iran signed with the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the US, Russia, France, China, and the UK, and as well as Germany and the European Union. Formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, it offered Tehran billions of dollars in sanctions relief in exchange for agreeing to curb its nuclear program. But Trump pulled the U.S. out of the deal in 2018 and imposed sanctions on Tehran. Iran then abandoned all its limits and is believed to have enriched uranium up to 60%. Slovakia, closer to the weapons grade level of 90%. Western powers, including the U.S., consider uranium enrichment to be a key step in producing nuclear weapons. Nonetheless, the New York Times reported that Trump waved off plans by Israel to strike Iranian nuclear sites in favor of renegotiating a deal. I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death, and I'd like to see that. That's my first option, Trump told reporters Thursday at the Oval Office when asked about possible airstrikes on Iran. So far, Iran has approached the talks with caution and suspicion of Trump, but at a weekly Friday prayer service attended by hardline clerics and members of the military, the message from the imam was revealing. The country should be open to these negotiations, although some of the crowd of thousands of people at the University of Tehran campus shouted DTA. I'm not going to say that just for, try to take the video down, but they shouted DTA. The imam said Iran should treat the talks with great caution because the U.S. and the Trump administration have proven they are not to be trusted. Trump has nonetheless threatened to bomb Iran if no deal was reached, and the U.S. moved a second aircraft carrier into Middle Eastern waters ahead of Saturday's talks. The president has also threatened to extend tariffs on other countries over buying Iranian oil in a bid to force Tehran's hand on top of the sweeping sanctions already in place. Says elsewhere on a visit to Iran on Thursday, Rafael Grossi head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, said the talks were in a very crucial stage. So again, Iran, is, pretty much trying to get their nuclear arsenal, together. And Trump doesn't want that to happen, but, it's too late. You're not going to stop them from producing weapons if they've already started, because they're pretty much doing the same thing that Kim Jong-un is doing. Once they make their weapons, what does he do? He pretty much parades them, down the street along with his military and other, military weapons and vehicles that they have, man. So Iran is just one of the many countries that's, ready to come up against America, So don't want to make this one too long. I'm going to start with the book of Joel, chapter 3 and verse 9. And it says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I am strong. And you clearly see that this is Iran right now. They're the weak saying that they're strong, man, because again, at first Iran was not a nuclear armed nation, but if they have created their own nuclear missiles, now they're a nuclear armed nation. Now they're currently 10, But again, man, this is what Iran and all of these other, nuclear armed nations are doing. They're exhausting their resources into their military, into, creating these weapons of war, because this is not going to be a traditional war, So I'm going to get that in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9 and verse 5. And it says, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. And right, man, because traditional warfare, you would have, men on one side of the battlefield and men on the other side of the battlefield, charging each other in the center, having weapons of war, swords, spears, shields, bow and arrows, other handheld weapons, things of that sort, hand-to-hand combat, guerrilla warfare, But this is going to be with burning and fuel of fire, meaning this war is going to be fought with the nuclear technology that is being created, man. These nuclear missiles, these ICBMs, SLBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, Now, I always have to make mention that, again, you will have ground troops that are going to be going to war with each other. But this coming Third World War is primarily going to be fought with these nuclear missiles, man, because that's the end-all be-all. This is literally the war to end all wars. This is why these nuclear missiles are being created, because these missiles legitimately have the capability of destroying the earth. But as it says in the scriptures, the earth abideth forever, so it won't be completely destroyed, only land masses, And as we know, America is going to be completely destroyed, So I'm going to get the book of Isaiah, chapter 54 and verse 16. And it says, behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. And I have created the waster to destroy. And again, man, just like I made mention, this is why these nuclear missiles are being created, because what does the blacksmith do? They create weapons of war. They're forging weapons of war and fire. So the modern day smith would be the scientists and physicists that are behind developing and creating these nuclear weapons, man, and the instrument for his work, the waster to destroy being the missiles themselves, because that's the time we're coming into, where these nations are going to come up against America, So just real quick, let's get Ezekiel 38 and I want to read the whole thing because the main point I want to get is in verse 7. But I'll start at verse 4. This is Ezekiel 38. You know what? I'll start at 3. Ezekiel 38 and 3. It says, "And say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I am against thee, O Gog," talking about Russia, "the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal." And if you didn't know, that's what Russia means, chief prince. Ra'ash Shar, that's how you would say it in Hebrew. Verse 4, it says, "And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, and all them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his bands, Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee." Verse 7, and it's the point. "Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them." And right, that's the main point, is that the nations that were mentioned, all of those different, Arab nations, the whole UAE, Russia is going to be a guard to these different Arab nations, and it says Persia and Ethiopia. So, not only Ishmael, but Elam, Ham, these different nations that Russia is in league with, they're going to be a guard unto these nations, because as it says, Iran pretty much got help from Russia, so that is one of the countries that is going to be, or that Russia is going to be a guard unto Iran, Excuse me, Slakia. So now I'm going to come back to the book of Isaiah. I'm going to go to chapter 13 and verse 4. And it says, "The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land." So right, man, these missiles are going to be shot from one end of earth. It's like, from one end of earth, unto the other. So, these missiles are going to be shot from, wherever, from Russia, and they're going to hit America. From China, and they're going to hit America. And obviously, America is going to bomb back. I personally, just me speaking as a man, I personally believe that, America, they're going to get their leg back, before it goes down. I believe that Russia, is going to get hit. Certain other European countries, China may get hit. We'll just have to wait and see. But again, as we know, as it stands, 100% confirmed is that Israel is going to be destroyed because the land has to be cleansed. Israel will be destroyed, but it's going to be built back up because Jerusalem is going to be the headquarters of the world. The Holy Land is going to go back to how it was in the garden. And America, aka Babylon the Great, is going to be completely destroyed. It's going to be left desolate. That's the fate of this place, total destruction. And as it says, the weapons of his indignation, man, the Lord's righteous anger, man, because even though, pursuant to Genesis 27 and 40, Esau's blessing was a sword, and his ultimate sword being these nuclear missiles. These are the Heavenly Father's weapons, man. As it says, these are the weapons of his indignation, that righteous anger. Because the very same thing, Esau, was blessed with is the very same thing, he's going to be taken out with. So he came into the power by the sword, so he's going to die by the sword, hence, the term, you live by the sword, you die by it, and that's going to be Esau's fate, man. He's going to be destroyed and then put into captivity. So I'm going to get the book of Revelation, chapter 7, and verse 1. It says, "And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree." And these are 4 literal angels, holding back the 4 winds. The 4 winds is a representation of the destruction, World War III, the day of the Lord, if you will, because there's an appointed time when this all is going to take place, Verse 2, "And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living power. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our power in their foreheads." So, right, once these, last couple prophecies come to pass, the main prophecy that we're waiting for is, the mass implementation of the mark of the beast, which is the RFID microchip, waiting for that to come to pass pursuant to Revelation 13, verse 16 on down, the time of Jacob's trouble, that, and, once the elect are sealed, man, then that's when this destruction is going to take place, So I'm going to jump to Revelation chapter 9. I'm going to end it with verse 15. And it says, "And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the 3rd part of men." And right, man, there's an appointed time, a particular hour, day, month, and year when this war is going to take place, man, because a lot of people are going to die. Those that make it through Jacob's trouble, that make it up until that point, man, if you're not of the elect, I would hate to be you. And I'm not one of you, because it's not going to end well. Because just like it says, for to slay the 3rd part of men, because you have 3 classes of men on the earth. You have the sons of God, which are the Israelites from Judah all the way down to Issachar, all 12 tribes. You have the sons of men, which are, the other heathen nations. And you have the sons of the wicked, which is the nation of Edom, you so-called white people. Because that's who this destruction is primarily for, you Edomites, man, the wicked. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. I like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I see you.